John, I know that you had created worked on an agenda, so thank you for that. The URL for the agenda I'm going to paste in the chat window if you haven't seen it. That's the agenda, and then I will go ahead and share. So John created this the short agenda. We've obviously just completed the introductions. He's asking a question: do the meetings need a chair? Typically, we don't, but if the group would like one, I'm perfectly okay with that. I think what we certainly need is somebody to kind of lead this initiative. Now, I'm going to lead it from the CycloneDX perspective, but ideally, we would want one of the threat modeling experts in the room to kind of lead this effort.
So personally, I'm more of a developer and doer rather than a leader of something like this. So I'm very happy to support, Steve, you and anybody else who is leading this project. But I know I'd be a poor leader myself. So I'm very willing to be active. I'm willing to do the proof of concepts, that sort of thing, do the coding, have ideas on how it should look. But actually leading it is not my thing.
Okay, that's fair enough. Well, give it people give it some thought. If you want to lead this effort, then please raise your hand or reach out to me on Slack offline if that's something you want to consider. But that's not going to stop our progress, so we will continue on. Agree on the goals. Well, I think everybody that's here, is there anybody else that needs to be invited? I know Adam Shostak was invited. I don't know about, I think Izar, for whatever reason, couldn't attend, right?
Yeah. I know Izar was invited, and I'll be talking to him anyway, because again, Pythonic threat modeling, it's at the beginning, the creation of the threat models that we need to get right, as is area risk.
Right, exactly.
And how about Chris Romeo from Devici?
Oh yeah.
Point.
He should absolutely be involved. I will reach out to Chris, and or if somebody else wants to reach out to Chris, that's fine too. But I like to give him a hard time anyway. Okay, yeah, he should absolutely be here. Is there does anybody know anybody from the Microsoft side? Is there, you think they'll actually have an appetite to change their tool, or what's that other company? Threat Modeler, right?
Oh, now Cisco, are you talking about the Cisco product, Threat Modeler?
Oh, is it a Cisco product now?
I can reach out to well, unless Cisco bought Threat Modeler, but I can reach out to Archie or Anurag. He's been involved with OWASP over the past 20 years as well, so I can reach out to him, see if he might be interested.
Okay, all right, yeah. I want to just make sure we got the commercial tools covered. The open source tools, I mean, ThreatDragon and PyTM, for example, is probably the most common ones that I know of.
There is Threagile, so I can get in contact with the people who contribute to that.
Okay.
If you like, yeah. So I can do that for sure, Steve.
Okay. Yep.
So did I hear correctly that Cisco bought Threat Modeler? Because Threat Modeler was its own entity.
No, Threat Modeler is still a private equity firm bought Threat Modeler,
Okay.
but
Okay.
the management team is still in place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, always good to know, because when things go to Cisco, that's where they go to die. So,
Okay, yeah, all right. So we'll reach out to those few folks and hopefully get them involved in this effort as well. Discuss if CycloneDX can be used for, let me just I'm actually working on a presentation that I'm giving later today for Reversing Labs, actually. And I think it's kind of relevant to what we're talking about here, at least just to kind of set the frame, right? So these are basically all of the capabilities that CycloneDX has today, right? We can represent software and hardware and services, cryptography, and all these other things, standards and attestations to those standards, etc. If you look at it purely from a bill of materials perspective, however, these are the only things that are really relevant to bill of materials, right? So we do a lot of things that obviously have nothing to do with bill of materials. CycloneDX itself is transforming it more into a transparency expression language, right? It started out as a BOM format, and now it's kind of evolving to this markup that is really about the overarching software and system transparency, not necessarily strictly a bill of materials. Three things that we're working on for the next release, which also have nothing to do with a bill of material, are something called, we frame them as blueprints. Blueprints is the idea of how software is architected from an abstract perspective, right? And this is not a data flow diagram or any kind of model. This is really more abstract. How is something architected? Blueprints also contains the concept of bill of behaviors, or Bob. What is something expected to do? With that, you'll also be able to document the actual behavior versus the expected. So that's kind of what Blueprints is. We're working on open source sustainability as well. And then while we're all here, threat models. All three of these things really are intended to help the defenders in an organization, right? If you look at a bill of material, okay, great. I got a list of software, I got a list of services, I got a list of hardware, whatever the case is. Not overly useful from a defender's perspective. So how can we make this format more useful to defenders? For example, if you're procuring software in your organization, how can you potentially put automated mitigating controls in place should the next Log4Shell actually happen, right? Well, if you look at it from that perspective, right, having a format that has these capabilities would potentially allow that kind of use case to transpire. I'm a big fan of threat modeling. I lead the threat modeling team at ServiceNow. We do threat models day in, day out, and that includes a lot of our M&As and other things that we do. So from a CycloneDX perspective, I want everyone to kind of take away the fact that while CycloneDX did start out as being purely a bill of materials specification that did software and hardware and services and these things, it is kind of moving beyond that into this more of this transparency expression language. So when we talk about threat modeling, I want us to frame it in the context of software and system transparency. Does anybody have any questions on that?
I did, Steve. So so what I was, from my perspective, I was very keen that in effect threat models are included in an SBOM. So, you know, which we have in our pipelines every day. So in effect, sort of carried or piggybacked or whatever you want to call it as the in an SBOM because it's a living thing and it may actually produce vulnerabilities and threats that are important for the rest of the chain. But from what you seem to be saying, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, you're saying a threat model could be a standalone entity. It's written in CycloneDX language format, but it's not actually in an SBOM. It's just sat there all alone as a threat model. So they're not.
Both can be true.
Oh, go on.
Both can be true.
Yeah.
We have this concept in CycloneDX called a bomb ref. And a bomb ref is essentially, it's a registered URN with IANA, but basically it allows us to specify a specific URN. That URN could be a reference to another object within the same bill of material, or it could be external. So how this works is that we typically, what we kind of envision is that, yeah, you theoretically, you could put your threat model with your SBOM, just like you can put your vulnerabilities with your SBOM. However, there's many more use cases that you can do if you decouple these things. And when you decouple them, right, now you can have individual access control on these things, right? Because you might want to give your lawyers access to the inventory, but not the vulnerabilities type of thing, right? So if you decouple these things, there's a lot more use cases that you can do. And the linking mechanism works regardless of whether or not they're in the same document or separate documents. So both can actually be true, John.
Yeah, this actually answered my questions, the question that I had before, what you said. Because I thought the same. I thought, well, I have a SBOM, and typically that's one product. That's one thing. But the threat model, what I see is often a system. There are lots of different applications in their databases, lots of systems. And this I couldn't get in my head. So I have one kind of software. I cannot do a threat model for one piece of it. Because I don't know, this software might be in a Kubernetes environment or somewhere else. And I need to have a look at the whole infrastructure there. But this explains it to me now and makes it clear. So I could have just a threat model, or it might reference then different products that are in different SBOMs, right? Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's going to be a number of different ways that we can do that. You know, I think in most threat models, you know, if the SBOM is for an application, well, that application obviously needs to be deployed somewhere, right? So it might rely on some hardware, it might rely on a database, it might be deployed in the cloud. So you're going to have some components represented in your threat model, some assets, some processes, etc., represented in your threat model that are not actually delivered with the software that you purchased, right? So again, CycloneDX does have that ability today. So again, it can be in the same document, it can be decoupled into separate documents, but I think it's going to be a really flexible format in order for us to kind of move forward with representing threat models in.
Steve, one of the things that's really interesting here, I was not aware of blueprints, it sounds like this is a requirements interchange format. Would that be close? I mean, there already is. Okay, there already is a rec IF that's widely used for requirements interchange, but that really plays nicely when paired with threat models. If you can tie those two together, now you start getting somewhere. So that's really quite interesting to me. I wasn't aware of blueprints. That's nice.
Yeah. So we can represent any standard. We're currently we currently have standards represented for I think most of the OWASP standards are represented, like ASVS, MASVS, SCVS, etc. We've got BSIM represented. We've got SSDF represented. We have a couple PCI Security Standards Council standards represented, and we are actively working with the PCI group so that eventually we want all their standards to be in this machine readable format. And then, of course, once standards are in a format like CycloneDX, you can attest to the individual requirements of the standard, supply the evidence, counter evidence, claims, obviously signatories in addition to the digital signatures. So yeah, it has all that support today. But yeah, I mean, even the requirements part could tie into the threat modeling capabilities that we have today, right? Which is one of the things, like if we look at OTM, which is a really great start in terms of having an interchange format, you know, but it obviously lacks a lot of things. Specifying requirements is one of those things, right? So we don't, I mean, we can build upon the component model that we already have. We can build upon the requirements that we already have in the attestations to that. For example, you could theoretically say that not only did you implement a mitigating control, but you could theoretically now attest to that and have signatories, you know, sign on behalf of that. So it just kind of, you know,
Yeah, you can go way past that. I mean, you look at things like right now, no threat model takes time domain into account. Short of complete and total denial of service, they don't look and saying, gee, I need to get this piece of information every 120 milliseconds. Oh, my mitigation now takes 150 milliseconds to implement this. And so it breaks this requirement. So it's tying all these things together. And this is when I talk about crawl, walk, run, exactly where I wanted to go with this. Is start taking these system modeling tools and using them now to automatically do your threat modeling. And so having all that available is really very cool.
Yeah. Well, good. So that's anyway, I know a lot of you were kind of new to CycloneDX. I wanted to kind of give a little bit of high level background to kind of set the stage. Are there any questions, concerns before we start talking about the use cases?
Maybe the first thing, if we could identify the use cases, as you did mention, and see what sort of threat modeling activities we would like to support or cover with CycloneDX. Like, is it going to be, you know, will it have to support like a holistic threat model on an application? Will it have to support only, you know, component-based threat models that might be on an epic level from, you know, an agile perspective done by developers? Would it be like an organizational threat model? You did mention the part with living threat models, right? How would the, let's say, the dynamic part out of it supported? Will there be external data sources that we would need to be able to consume, so to say, through the standard, and so on and so forth? And then maybe afterwards see which of these use cases can be easily covered by CycloneDX at the moment, or, you know, identify whether there are any major blockers.
Right.
With the
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We typically start off with use cases for everything that we do in CycloneDX. That kind of, I mean, just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. The use cases kind of drive everything for us. And obviously the threat modeling, there's no, as we all know, there's no right or wrong way to do a threat model, right? And there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of approach threat model. Everything from, you know, obviously Pasta and Stride to Linden to, you know, dataflow diagrams and attack trees, and just, yeah, the answer is always yes. Not necessarily a specific approach. In fact, even on my team, we've typically adopted the 4-question mentality, right? We don't require any particular methodology, as long as the questions are kind of addressed. We in some cases we use a combination of Pasta, and we don't really use Stride, but we certainly use it for categorization, right? It's good for that sort of thing. We find. But Yeah, so I think we need to look at all of our use cases, not just from our own perspective, but I mean, as a threat modeling industry as a whole, because I think, in my opinion, the only right way to do a threat model is to just start asking questions.
Yeah, I just want to say there that the industry, well, when I say the industry, multiple verticals across the globe are demanding, hungry for, some guidance. And, I think it's got to come from groups and focus groups like this. To your point, Steve, you can go from, Sunnyvale, California to Atlanta, Georgia, and drive a vehicle, right? And you can rent a convertible, you can rent a semi. There's different ways to get to point A to point B. You may not rent a semi, just because it depends on your route, depends on a lot of things. I think that, although that conceptually it's good to abstractly say, yeah, there's no way to do it. Linden, might be something that we, for example, advocate for privacy-based threat models, where data use, flow, consent management, all those sort of things that are privacy related factor in. There's times and places for security-centric threat models where security is non-negotiable. And then there's other things where people, for the most part in enterprise and big enterprises, they do not have the time to triage the thousands of things that come out of multiple different acronym-based security products. And so you got to have a risk-based approach. So I think the overall collective goal of this is great. There's a lot of good details and tentacles to CycloneDX that provides a lot of opportunity. But it does go back to use cases, right? Because everyone's gonna, use a different type of threat model in a different way. Even if we just had one use case, look at the challenges of interoperability of data outside of, where we are today, just in vuln management, something that's been so commoditized over the past 30 years plus, right? There's still challenges in reconciling, what's what there. So I think the overall initiative is great. I haven't seen that full infographic that you put down in front of for everybody on CycloneDX. I think there's a lot of things that are definitely very interesting. And I would love to see a common data set that could allow for threat models to be fluid, like Jan said, and to also be a little bit more self-governing, especially in the advent of AI, with, a lot of things could automatically feed each other and become truly like a living threat model.
Yeah. Living threat model. I love that. One of the things that many of the working groups also do is we have these authoritative guides. Now we have one for SBOM. It's in its second edition right now. It's like, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 pages, something like that. But over the last year, we've introduced support for cryptography bill of materials, right? This is becoming a U.S. government and international requirement, as well as attestations, which covers, the standards and requirements and your, organization's adherence to them. In both of these cases, the actual working group, which in this case would be us, they were the ones that actually created these guides. So not only did the groups actually create the specification, but they created the guidance on how to properly use the specification. And of course, use cases were, kind of a big factor in that, right? So we have an opportunity here, not just to, we create the spec, but tell people, educate people on best practices on how to use it, right? That they can kind of take back to their own organization and apply, because every organization, obviously, we all know, is different, right?
Yeah, no, agreed. Yeah, no, this is definitely something to review, for sure. But taking a step back, so this meeting is focusing on threat modeling bill of materials, correct? Right?
Yeah.
And so you put down some objectives for, for that. I think a lot of people are interested in the interoperability, some I heard mentioned there that, having it included in SBOMs. So I want, I definitely want to allow you to continue to moderate and facilitate the conversation, but I just wanted to be able to see, it sounds like you were about to dive into the various different parts of the CycloneDX framework, so that it kind of shows how do we get there, right? Is that where you were going?
No, I was actually going to visit the use cases first.
Okay.
Just kind of get agreement and alignment on, hey, these are the things that we want to tackle. And maybe we want to tackle everything in the first iteration. Maybe we want to only tackle, 80% of what it is that we come up with, right? I don't know. But I, if we start off with the use cases and then go to the specification. Now, my style and, the group can kind of decide if my style is the right style to use. But historically, the way I work is if we are, as a group, if we are defining the specification, I'm literally going to be defining it on the call. So as a group, right, if we're proposing changes to the specification, we're going to be live coding that. So that there's no, so that the work is literally done, in the public and in real time. So if that's, we find that, at least I find that we can make progress faster, and you get the additional benefit of not just, code review, but we've got a lot of people on this call. So the code review is usually really good, especially for somebody that's dyslexic. So this is this is awesome. But that's typically how I work.
Sorry to interrupt, Steve. I was just I had a question around the scope of what we're going to, what would we threat model and how that would be applied, because by attaching a threat model format to a BOM, we're kind of moving into the world of whatever a BOM could apply to would be the thing that we want to threat model. Where I'm going is, you could, for example, threat model a business process, but a business process is very unlikely to be a bombable thing. Like, you wouldn't necessarily have a bomb for a business process, but you may have a threat model for the business process. So
Correct.
I think one of the questions we would want to answer as a group, or I think we need to address is the format going to cater for all possible things that can be threat modeled? Or are we saying that the format should be logically consistent with where a BOM would be used? So if you would use a BOM for software, then you would do threat modeling using the TM-BOM format for software. But business processes, for example, would be out of scope for what this format needs to cater for.
Right. The as we're starting to move away from being a bill of materials into more of a transparency expression language, I don't want to, in my opinion, I think Jan's still on the phone call, but because Jan's the other core lead for Cyclone, I don't want to confine it to just things we can inventory. CycloneDX already supports the concept of formulation. Formulation is how something came to be. It's kind of a applied business process. So formulation could describe how software was created, how a model was trained, or how I made chocolate chip cookies, right? Formulation can describe all of those things today. So it's kind of the applied version of a process. So we already have the concept of that today. And if we need a higher level abstraction from that, then that's probably something that would need to be added to CycloneDX as well. I actually attended a call, or not a call, but I remember attending a session that Tony UV gave back in, I don't know, man, it was probably it was a long time ago. It was in AppSec Cali, and Tony was talking about, I think, threat modeling the United States Postal Service. and it was a process. And yes, there were things in that process, but it was a fascinating talk. And I've been threat modeling processes ever since. So yeah, I think processes should absolutely be in the scope for what it is that we're trying to do.
I mean, especially since we have this formulation thing that could describe how software is deployed or vendored and stuff. And since we have this already, we could even threat model that. So this is an opportunity we could take if the working group decides to move in that direction in this period, or they might say, no, do it next time, just as you said.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Stephen?
Yes, nice, clear. Thank you.
All right, all right. Okay. Let's see. We've got 15 minutes left. Looks like Adam's been in this document. Has I put the link in the chat? Looks like some folks are on the document now. Let's see. Use cases. Enhancing interoperability. I think everyone has kind of, or most folks have kind of expressed the need for tools to be interoperable. Does anybody have any comments on, looks like Adam, do organizations exchange bombs across departments today? Yes, they do. No, it cannot. Let's see. So it looks like use case one is just interoperability. And I think that was one of the goals that we kind of started with.
So given the what you showed, Steve, with the rest of the ecosystem, the bomb ecosystem, with the blueprints, with attestations and so on, I guess my question is, do we envisage that the TM bomb format can be used standalone, independent of, so can it completely represent an entire threat model all on its own, or will it have dependencies with other parts of the bomb?
The answer is yes. Let me kind of show an illustration of how this works with well, let's just go to VDR. So what typically happens is that you want to decouple your, in this case, it's vulnerability information about components away from the inventory of said components, right? So they're two separate documents. Now, the bomb link thing that we have is simply, and this is, again, this is a formally registered URN, but basically every CycloneDX document has a serial number and version, which specifies that particular document. And then you can specify the individual identifier, unique identifier within that document. So this allows you to deep link from one document to another. It also allows you to link within the same document, right? So theoretically, we could put everything in a single threat model, threat modeling bomb, everything that would be necessary to represent that threat model, or we could decouple that, right, and make it very, very granular. And when you upload the threat model, you're basically going to be uploading like multiple documents simultaneously, right? and then the linkage kind of puts everything together. When we develop the guide, I think it's on, whatever best practices that the group kind of comes up with, I think should be documented in that guide, because that's really, what we want people to do. But as tool vendors, tool creators, we need to kind of know that, hey, we might not be able to resolve something because it might be external, and that information hasn't been supplied to us.
And this URN format, can it refer to every noun that is in another part of the BOM? So for example, in the TM BOM, could we use this URN format to refer to a vulnerability that's in a different BOM?
Yes.
A specific vulnerability, not just the components.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes. And again, it could be a different component. And if we wanted to put the vulnerabilities in that same document, we could do that as well. Right. So as tool creators, for simplicity's sake, I could envision a future where we might want to export a given threat model and have all of the information represented in that single document, right? It's going to make import and export much easier for interoperability. But as we also have to realize that as tool creators, that things could be referenced externally. But for import export, I think it makes a lot of sense to have everything represented in a single document. We should probably get into, let's see, streamlining vendor risk management. Do we want to go through these questions as a group today, or do we want to kind of like brainstorm on more of the lower level use cases?
We have another 9 minutes left, right?
Yeah.
So we cannot do too much content today.
Right.
I have the feeling it would be better we all read them until the next meeting, put comments in the document, and then have this discussion in the next meeting, and we're all prepared for it better.
Yep. Okay, that's fine.
I will take issue with Adam's first comment there. And it's chicken and egg thing. Yeah, they're not submitted because there's no good way to do that. How are you going to do that? I'll guarantee you, if that was, the FDA would have us submitting threat models.
Oh, I know they would.
Guaranteed. Okay. So yeah.
Facilitate regulatory requirements. That's kind of up your thing, Christopher.
Seems to be. Don't know how I got here, but yeah.
Yeah.
Not all threat models or approaches incorporate, regulatory considerations. And, this is, I mean, everything that you had there on the infographic there before, Steve, with CycloneDX, I mean, they're already included, as you already know, in various facets of the risk-centric approach, right? So if you look at like, things like attestations and standards, you preemptively begin that in stage 1, right? To see, because there's if you, especially going back to regulatory, right? If you have an FDA wearable, or if you have, I still remember there was this retainer-like device that controls mastication rates for diet loss. And in order for it to pass, and it has a remote connectivity for data feed to an API, you have to go through the FDA, right? So it's a go-to-market like impact to the product. If you use another approach that's just security-centric, especially at a software layer, you don't see any of that. So if you fast forward to 2 disparate forms of threat models with their respective forms of information, how do you reconcile that? It's one of my, and then, should you reconcile that? And how do you share that over time? I mean, these are complex issues that, over the course of time we'll have to address.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have an answer for you, but yeah, as a group, we need to come up with that answer. And if there's things that we need to put in the specification to make that clear to the consumer, then maybe that's something that we need to work on. or if it ends up being a best practice, then, you know, ends up being in the guide, for example, then that's something that we need to document. But yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to this effort.
We didn't have enough challenges with threat modeling, so this is good.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it comes at a right time, right place. CycloneDX was just ratified recently as an international standard. So there's that. We're also going through, we're going to be talking to ISO here as well, which is another international standards organization. So there's that. And plus, you've got some regulation for secure by design, secure by default from various world governments. That's on coming up. So I think, you know, I don't know. It's we've all been threat modeling for a very long time for the most part. But, you know, hopefully threat modeling is going to have its day, and hopefully we can be there when that happens. So yeah, I think the timing is right for this. So we've got 5 minutes left. We can't dive into a bunch of stuff, but I'll open the floor for any kind of comments, suggestions on what to discuss during next week's meeting. Or is it next week or is it 2 weeks from now? 2 weeks from now, right?
Probably bad timing for Black Hat, right? So there's a lot of people that might be tied up.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You're coming to my neck of the woods now.
What's that?
You're coming in my neck of the woods. I live in Vegas. So.
Oh, that's right. You forgot about that. That's like in your back door.
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's 10 minutes away.
So between now and maybe the next time we meet, if we can go through this document and make comments and suggestions. Looks like Adam's got some suggestions. Stefan, Stephen. So let's go through this document and start adding to it, changing it. I don't think I necessarily dove into, oh yeah, I did, I guess. Methodology agnostic. That's going to be hard. I think, you know, Tony kind of alluded to that. There's a lot of different ways to kind of approach the problem. So that's going to be challenging for us as specification authors. Diagrams, multiple perspectives of those diagrams. But yeah, go through the document between now and the next time we meet. And I'm really, really excited to kind of dive into these use cases.
Steve, what exactly do you mean by methodology agnostic? Does that mean we can't acknowledge a methodology, or that it's flexible enough to encompass all of the known methodologies?
Maybe the answer is both. I honestly don't know. I mean, if we have so much information in a bill of material in a single document, should we give clues to the consumer of that document on what methodology was used?
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, we capture SDLC life cycles in CycloneDX today, and we capture cryptography life cycles. Maybe we capture the process that was used, or multiple processes, because you could theoretically combine processors. There's nothing prohibiting an individual from doing that. But yeah, I don't have an answer. I think as a group, we kind of need to figure that out.
Cool. Yeah.
I think there's no debate that if we're doing collectively as a group a threat model for the sole purposes of identifying like privacy-based threats, we would all use Lindum.
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't use Pasta. So
right.
There's nothing wrong. I mean, I think I don't know if there's some sort of taboo, but the market, right? The insurance companies, the banks, the multitude of different industries, they need guidance. I think if we basically say, if you're going to do this type of threat model, here's the schema of what that, SBOM or CycloneDX output looks like. And I think if we try to do a universal like Esperanto type of threat model language, then we're going to run into as much adoption success as Esperanto had. So
there's also a difference between categorization of threats and using Linden and Stride for that specific purpose, or using the approach behind Linden and Stride, or using PASTA as a broader frame, or using different approaches. And I'm not sure whether we want to capture both the method and the classification, or I think we need to make sure that we make a distinction between the method that was used, the process that was applied, and the, I don't know, categorization, knowledge base, inspiration that was used. I don't have answers, but I just want to point out that that might be different things.
Yeah.
If we look at Stix, for example, there's a lot of threat feeds or taxi services that have elements within the Stix frameworks that are empty, right? But it doesn't prevent the sharing of threat intel. I think that if we come up with a schema so that there is some level of interoperability, where if you have a supply chain of software vendors that are using Stride, and you predominantly as an enterprise are using PASTA, that you can still ingest it and it's still material, and it helps to contextualize some of the things that you have as a downstream dependency on a product that you have in your overall application environment.
Right.
But I still think you need to flag somewhere that it originated as Stride. So as you do your mappings, you know, you can inform how to do those mappings.
Agreed. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and it might be a case where, you know, as Tony was mentioning, right? Maybe we have different parts of the specification for different methodologies, right? That would be one approach to doing it. But yeah, this is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to this. So with that, I know we're at the top of the hour. So thank you all for joining.
One question.
Yeah.
Do we have a repeat invitation? I only have the kickoff so far.
It is on the, I think I put it on the OWASP shared calendar, which, let's see, is in Slack. Let's see, where is it? CycloneDX, threat model. Yeah, it's on this calendar right here, which is in the Slack workspace.
Right.
So the next meeting, so we've got the this is the one we're on right now, the CycloneDX threat modeling working group. And then the next call, I believe, is Wednesday, the August 7th.
So yeah, okay, then I know where to find it and put in my calendar.
Yeah.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Okay. All right, very good. Reach out if you need the calendar invite or have any questions. If somebody wants to take a lead of the group, let me know. And otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.